Very good. Bear with me one sec. Ooh, hold on. There we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So a lot of what I do in crypto space is advise projects on what they want to do. And this is both with NFTs or DAOs, blockchain, whatever. And what I end up hearing a lot of times from clients, and a lot of clients, pay lawyers a lot of money and then ignore advice. But what we are telling them regularly is, look, a decentralized autonomous organization is not necessarily what you think it is. And more specifically, it doesn't necessarily make you safe the way you think it might. So what we discuss is you have in the United States 30 million plus LLCs. If you grow the idea to S Corps, C Corps, LLPs, whatever other entities that are created, you probably have over 100 million entities in the United States. And out of those entities, you have roughly 500 of them in Wyoming that are called DAOs. With that, you have right now roughly 443 US government agencies, and that's purely federal agencies, and they have a lot of jurisdiction. And that's with 7.9 billion people on Earth. So why am I talking about these numbers? Why do they matter? So when you talk about a decentralized autonomous organization, you have to break down the three words: decentralized, autonomous, and organization. And you have to talk about whether the benefits and negatives of each one of those. And you also have to talk about whether or not what you're proposing as a DAO is actually a DAO. So right now, the fallacies of decentralized is assuming that votes are actually decentralized. This is a fallacy that happens in a lot of Web3. We just saw that in this past year with Terra Luna, and we see that, Terra Luna just disintegrated, and the only person that seems to have made money is currently on the run from the police in the situation of Terra Luna. Why is that? Because it may not have been as decentralized as was proposed. What we're basically saying here is that we have a situation of the bulk of the tokens that were created were not owned by 50,000 people in one token a piece. It was a lot of tokens being owned by one and pieces of tokens owned by many others. What ended up happening is that basically disintegrated was one person made a lot of money, some other people made some money, and a lot of people lost their entire retirements. People lost everything. So it wasn't really decentralized the way we think of what decentralized should or could be. Autonomous basically means you don't need human intervention. However, every DAO that I know of, even if they are doing, a more decentralized approach, they're not autonomous. They're not a situation where it's all done by smart contract. It's not autonomous, it's not a robot doing this. It's people making votes. And so autonomous is probably not the right word. It's more a decentralized organization that's not autonomous. And many of those organizations are not even doing their votes on chain. Yet again, a problem. Organization means many things in many places. Ultimately, it's generally a group of people. And in this situation, a group of people should have an idea of what the votes that they do actually count for how much in a organization. In many cases, if somebody has, let's say it's a DAO that every person has a one vote per one NFT, a lot of times you'll see one of the votes or one of the wallets have 300 NFTs. So it's not really a decentralized situation at all, as we said before. And more specifically, is that really an organization at that point, or is it just a popularity vote of the person who has the primary votes? I would argue that it's more of a popularity contest if it's not actually decentralized. And even if it's decentralized, it still could be. So what's the takeaway of this? Most DAOs are not decentralized, they're not autonomous, or they're not organizations in the classic sense, and more specifically, they're probably not legal organizations. Why does that matter? If you get sued right now and you're part of a DAO, and the DAO has no legal organization, that means you could get sued for everything. You could get sued for your home, you could get sued for your car, for your bank accounts, because it's general liability if there is no legal organization or legal protection. If you have a legal protection, that's centralized. That's a centralized component of what is supposed to be decentralized. So just by organizing legally, you're necessarily probably making it not specifically a DAO anymore. It's what I call a CDAO. It's a centralized, decentralized organization. But why am I telling you all this? It's because the really cool things that I see in NFTs that are a lot of fun are the things that possibly get you in a lot of trouble, specifically in the United States. That are things like putting NFTs as real estate, particularly if it's not a singular title where you own a percentage of a property. That's the next term as well, as a fractionalized NFT where you own pieces, parts of something, and more specifically, tokenized assets. Why are these problems? Well, as Alex told you earlier, he does a lot of this type of work of securitization. What does end up happening when you create these things? You're usually creating what's called a security. Securities are not illegal, and that's something that a lot of people in Web3, they talk about securities all the time as if they're illegal. They're not. They do have to be registered in the United States, and that only allows certain people to invest in them. So you have a DAO that's not what it aims to be. You have the things that are really interesting and fun that maybe are problematic in the United States. So what does that mean for all intensive purposes? Does that mean that this terminates the ability for Americans to participate in Web3? And the answer is, like all attorney answers, is yes, no, and maybe, or it depends is the classic answer. So what you're looking at here is a situation of, it depends on what you get involved in Web3. It depends on what your hopes are. And it also depends on if you're investing money for the purpose of gaining a profit based on the work of others. And ultimately, that is a pretty hard line test in the United States to determine if something is a security, which again goes back to the last slide of all the really fun things are probably in the United States, probably considered securities. Art is probably okay as a singular thing. However, when you start fractionalizing art, it becomes something different. And so what that means is Americans can get involved in a lot of different things in Web3, but they have to be cognizant of what they're doing. And more specifically, they need to make sure that the projects that they're getting involved in give them an ability to have an understanding of what their risks are. And more specifically, is the project that they're getting involved in going to have legal problems with what they're creating? That's along the lines of BlockFi this past year paid $300 million to basically get the SEC to say, okay, you can continue doing business in the United States. So ultimately, there are reasons why a DAO in and of itself is not safe. And for most attorneys, we would suggest some sort of corporate formation. Obviously, each project is going to be different. And more specifically, if you're going to have a DAO and NFT offering, I would highly suggest that as you do that, that you talk to counsel, tell them what you want, tell them what you want to create. And if you are creating something that is a bright line security for the United States, maybe your target audience can no longer be Americans. And so it's something to think about, it's something to play with, and ultimately, I deal with Web3 on a daily basis. I have a lot of fun advising the projects I'm part of. And some of those projects are absolutely worth your time, effort, and consideration. And some of them are stuff that we may or may not be able to get involved with as Americans inside the United States as non-accredited investors. So ask questions, do your own research, and ultimately, if you're building something or want to build, talk to the professionals that do this on a daily basis and spend the time, effort, money, and energy at getting answers that are going to prevent you from getting into trouble. And that's why DAO is not spelled S-A-F-E. Thank you, everybody. I know Vandana Taxali has